and enterprise scale customers on helping them accelerate their adoption of the Power Platform. And with me today, I've got Mike, or I think it's the other way around. But yeah, Mike, do you want to introduce yourself?
So I'm Michael Ox, Business Applications MVP, and I'm working as a vendor with the PowerCat team right now, and primarily focused on the ALM side of the COE starter kit and working with Manuela closely on that.
So today we'll be talking to you about why do we have a COE starter kit? What is it? What's in the COE starter kit? And here, fingers crossed, I'm hoping to do quite a lot of live demos if everything goes well. And then we'll talk about how the COE starter kit is shipped, just kind of how do we make it available to the community. And then Mike will take it over for the last 30 minutes to talk about ALM and the ALM accelerator tools that are also part of the COE starter kit and introduce you to those. So I'm part of the PowerCat team. We work with some of our largest global enterprises that adopt the Power Platform at an enterprise scale where everyone has access to the Power Platform. There's thousands of makers. This is really exciting, and we also deal with quite a lot of tricky questions when it comes to that enterprise scale adoption. Like how do I identify apps that are very highly used? How do I identify apps that aren't used at all anymore, or where the maker has left the organization and left that app behind? How do I prevent that Power App sprawl and make sure that everyone is productive, working with Power Apps, but also, preventing that risk to data and keeping my environment secure and my tenant, my data secure. And then kind of on the other end of the spectrum also, how do I find my champions, my success stories that I can highlight to my organization to encourage further adoption of the Power Platform? When it comes to kind of that enterprise scale adoption, the digital transformation challenges are sometimes technical, finding out like defining your governance processes, making sure your data is secure, setting up data loss prevention policies. And some of those challenges are obviously also like cultural changes in your organization, figuring out, the partnership between IT and business, redefining the role of IT, where all of a sudden IT is maybe not the provider of the solution anymore, but the enabler to get citizen makers onto the platform so they can solve the business problems themselves. So we created the COE Starter Kit to help with some of those challenges. It is a tooling approach to help with the how. Once, as an organization, you've worked out what you want to achieve with the Power Platform and what your key goals are. So kind of broadly speaking, the COE Starter Kit is a templatized implementation of best practices. So through working with all of our customers, we see patterns that repeatedly led to successful adoption of the Power Platform. And we've templatized those, implemented them on top of the Power Platform, and made them available to our customers to download. So the key word in that is starter kit. It is meant to be a starting point for an organization to figure out how they want to approach their Power Platform adoption. It's meant to serve as inspiration or as a pattern that you can modify to kind of make it your own, to support your Power Platform adoption based on where you are in your maturity of adopting the platform and what your kind of organizational policies are that will impact the Power Platform adoption as well. And it is meant to be to govern and administer the platform. You've obviously got the Power Platform Admin Center capabilities that provide kind of the starting point to that. And you can build your own rules and governance policies with the connectors or the PowerShell commandlets. The kit is really meant to be kind of that templatized approach, so you don't have to start from scratch when it comes to setting up your policies there. Before I dive into demos, just kind of want to talk a little bit about the architecture of the kit. So what we kind of, through working with customers, I think the biggest part about governing your Power Platform adoption is having a holistic overview of what is going on in your tenant. Who are my makers? What connectors are they using? Which applications are very highly used or highly shared or not used at all anymore? So the foundation of the CUI Starter Kit is sits in Dataverse, where in tables there we gather data about your inventory, your telemetry, and your organization data. So that's all in the Dataverse instance of the environment where you install the CUI kit. It is shipped as a managed solution, so install it there, and the tables get populated as we crawl your tenant to kind of gather information like that. And that foundation really, on top of that foundation, we build experiences that broadly fall into 3 buckets. Admin experiences, so apps and flows and a Power BI dashboard that is targeted at the admin persona to make their life easier. So giving them an overview of everything that's going on in the tenant, like customized dashboards down to that kind of organizational data level where it's like these are the departments that are using the Power Platform, etc. And also, things like that allow you to bulk update permissions and identify orphan resources where the maker has left the organization. And then the second bucket is maker-facing experiences. So those those are apps and flows and like things like adaptive cards in Teams that target the maker persona. And in the context of the CUI, a lot of this is meant to kind of make the conversation between an admin and a maker easier. So the ability for a maker to request a new environment or a new connector to be added to a DLP policy that the admin approves, where kind of the conversation is taken out of email, and you have an automated process that that enables this. Or things like, an app is highly used, so the admin needs further information about that application to best understand how to support it. So a process to kind of ask the maker to provide things like a business justification or data classification, and again for the admin to approve that. So a lot of kind of that bucket is around automating the conversation between admins and makers. And then a limited amount of applications that are part of the CUI kit are targeted at everyone in your organization. So one of those is the app catalog, where you can highlight apps that you want everyone in your organization to have visibility of. So if you have implemented a process in Power Apps to request leave or things like that, that's probably an application that you would want to highlight in the app catalog. Or equally things that might be applicable to multiple departments, just to get higher visibility of what is being built on top of the Power Platform and allow other teams to maybe find commonalities and reusability across those departments as well. With that, I'll go kind of straight into the demo, because I think it just brings it to life a little bit more rather than walking through slides. So let me drag over my screen. And now, like, fingers crossed. So one of the apps in the CUI Starter Kit is called the Admin Command Center. And we really see it as the glass pane for an admin to get familiar with the CUI Starter Kit. So it lists all of the applications that are part of the CUI kit and kind of provides that easy entry point to discover what else is part of the kit. And then we've also added a few further screens here, just to make it kind of more useful and allow the admin to, really have this as a starting point. So one of the things we list here is message center news from the Microsoft 365 Message Center that are relevant to the Power Platform admin, so that they don't have to go to the Microsoft Admin Center. They can just review those messages that are relevant for them here and see kind of what are the changes that are upcoming and what's the impact on my organization there. You can also check the Power Platform news from here. Yes, this is a Canvas app. So this brings in the RSS feeds of our blogs, and so you can keep up with those here and launch them from there. Again, kind of bringing all of the blogs together, so you don't have to look at 4 different ones. And the same is true for release wave notes. So we also bring those in because we've heard from many admins that it's really difficult to stay up to date with what's going on in the Power Platform, what is being released, when have release notes been updated, what has changed. So that also is coming in via an RSS feed, and you can launch that from there, so you can really see what's new and kind of stay up to date there. So making it kind of easier for the admin persona there. And then the last thing I want to point out is the learn part here, where we bring in MS Learn paths and certifications that are relevant to the admin persona. So if as an admin you want to do kind of further upskilling, you can do so from here and explore that part from here as well. So yeah, this is like, we definitely see that as the starting point to explore the CV Starter Kit. And then the one thing I'll go into now is the Power BI dashboard. So I've already opened that on a side screen here. So the heart of the CV Starter Kit is probably this Power BI dashboard that has many pages and hopefully answers a lot of questions that you have about your Power Platform adoption data. So things, it brings together kind of your tenant level overview together with your organizational information as well as your usage information. So you've got information about active departments, you can identify the unique users and sessions per app, and you've got all of your inventory as well. So as a Power Platform admin, you don't work in isolation, right? You will have many different groups in your organization approach you about the Power Platform adoption, and they will have like different questions about the adoption. So your change management team might be really interested in the top departments or the top makers that are using the Power Platform, so they can identify success stories and reach out to them. So using the makers page here, you can kind of see all of these departments. You can exactly see how many apps and flows, maybe desktop flows and chatbots individual people have, where are they based. So you can either bring people together that are maybe in the same area and both adopting the Power Platform so they can learn from each other, or you can highlight it's like the engineering team is spearheading the Power Platform adoption in my organization. So I want to highlight them maybe through an intranet story or like a newsletter. If you then talk to your procurement team, the questions will be vastly different. Your procurement team might be interested in, sorry, let me just reset that. Your procurement team might be really interested in which are the departments that are using premium functionality, because I want to cross-charge them the license cost. So using the app license assessment page, you can drill down into first the connector tier, and then from here you could go into a connector name, but you can also go into maker department. So I can see it's the marketing team. They've got 62 applications using premium connectors. And I can also, in my demo tenant, less amazing, but I can also see how many unique users and sessions they have on those applications. So I can start that cross-charging process based on that information. And then your security team, your information security team, they will also have questions about the Power Platform adoption, and that is typically around specific connector usage or action usage. So for example, your InfoSec team might reach out to you and ask about this HTTP connector that they've heard about, and they want to know if that is being used in your in any of your flows. So from here you can select HTTP. I already had that pre-typed, but you could bring up any action there that is being used in flow. So forward email is another example that sometimes throws up questions. But yeah, so you can from here filter down to the HTTP action. You can see the flows that are using this action, what environment that is in, and if that flow is stopped or started, and kind of bring all of that in together. You can let your information security team know that information, but through that you also prove that you've got kind of full visibility of what is going on in the platform. And then, yeah, obviously based on that, you can make decisions about your DLP policies. So enough about I could talk about the dashboard probably for an hour, because as you can see, there's many more pages to it, and similar to the flow and app pages that I've just showed you, we've got similar views for desktop flows and Power Virtual Agents as well, so you can explore, like, answer similar questions about those assets as well. And we've recently added portals as well. So yeah, that it kind of brings together all of your inventory. Let's now look at some of the processes that we are automating between makers and admins. So one of the applications that we have is actually I've opened the wrong one. 1 second. So I'm now I'm first going to present the maker view, and then I'll present the admin view. So one of the apps that we have is an environment request management tool. So one of the first things that admins typically do is they lock down who can create environments, because they want to protect the capacity that they've got available. And they might even want to, they want to prevent environment sprawl, etc. So once that is locked down, you then need a way for makers to request new environments that they may need for, development, test, and production purposes, or to run training events or hackathons. And to take that process out of, pinging emails or Teams messages to the admin persona, we've created this application here. From a maker point of view, I can kind of from here immediately say, these are the connectors that I want to use, so that the admin is already aware of what DLP policy they need to apply to that environment, or if they need to create a new one. I can also say I need additional admins to that environment. And then on the last screen, I can highlight the environment name. And because like here I'm stating I need this for a hackathon, I know that after 30 days I won't need the environment anymore. I'll ask people like if they build something that they want for production to migrate that to a different environment. So I can set that here, and then the environment will automatically be cleaned up. And I could also ask for a Dataverse instance on that environment there. And then once I've saved that will get submitted. And then there's a separate application for the admin where they can review those environment requests. I've already got 5 submitted here that I can show you, to you. So they show under pending here. I can see the list, the state, when it was created, and if an expiration date has been requested. And then if I view one of those requests, I can see the DLP policies that would already impact that environment. So it's, for example, if you've got a DLP policy that applies to all environments, then that would also apply to that new environment. So you can see that here, but you can also see that with the connectors that I've requested, that policy isn't blocking. It's covering the environment, but I don't need to take any action because it's not blocking here. I can add further comments. I can set a security group, and then once I approve that request, that environment will automatically get created. The maker will receive a notification about it. And you're good to go. If you needed to update DLP policies, you can do that from in here as well. So you can kind of see what policies you've got available in your tenant and apply them to that environment as well. So a really great way to take a lot of manual effort away from the admin, because typically, like, they would get the request via email. They would then go to the admin center to create the environment, and then set the DLP policy, and then set a security group, etc. So it's all kind of unified in this experience there. So a great way to automate that process. So I'm going to close those windows. And then the last process that I wanted to show you was regarding application compliance. So one thing that we typically hear from customers is that when they get to a certain maturity, they want to build a bigger picture of the applications that are being created by their maker community. So they want to learn more about why that application is created, and figure out the best support model for those applications, especially when they're like in the default environment. So we've got a process in Flow that prompts makers to provide those details if their application is highly shared or highly used, and you can configure kind of what that means for your organization. Is it shared with 50 people or with 500, for example? And then as a maker, I come to the Developer Compliance Center, and I can see applications that I own or that I'm the co-owner of, where that fall out of compliance, basically, with that kind of red traffic light symbol here, or yellow, I've clearly done something right, but some bits are missing there as well. And then when I go to the details, I've got that traffic light here to say, oh, I filled out the app description, so I've done well there. I've published the app today, so that's good as well. But I've not provided those support details that my admin has requested. So I can put some details in here. And the most important ones are like around the business impact, where based on that, the admin will probably make a decision on what to do with that application. Like, is it fine in this environment? Does it need to go to a production environment? Do I need a support team around that? And I can provide a category here as well and upload some files. So once I submit those details, the admin point of view is in a model-driven app. So in this model-driven app, the admin can also see all of the applications there, and they can review applications that have submitted their compliance details there. And from there, I'm just going to take one of those. They can see the details that the maker has submitted. They can set their own, specify their risk assessment there, re-specify the category if it's not been provided by the maker, and through that way build a bigger picture about what that application is, is about, where the other metadata details like when it's been created or when it's been modified don't provide you with that information, basically. Yeah, that should have been submitted now. And then save that from there. So through kind of a few simple steps like the flow that automates those details, and kind of working in this model-driven app, you add like additional details to your application there, and build a better understanding of that, and can kind of formulate better support processes there. So that's like a whirlwind tour of some of the applications that are part of the CV Starter Kit. We've got like quite a large list, and it's impossible to demo in 30 minutes, but hopefully that gives you an idea of some of the things that are part of the CV Kit, but also some of the governance processes that it enables. Like in some ways, it's less about having that compliance center. It's more about prompting you to think about a process to gather that data from your makers. What are the fields that you want to have? Is this something that's relevant to your organization? Do you already have like service management processes in place that you can embed Power Apps in? And maybe you don't implement it as a Canvas app. Maybe you use your existing tools for that, but kind of prompting you to think about processes like that. So that's part of the CV Kit is also making sure that you think about all of the relevant questions when it comes to your Power Platform adoption. And then now kind of changing gears a little bit, we do ship the CV Starter Kit on GitHub. We have monthly releases, so typically in the first week of the month we ship a new version, and that contains like bug fixes, new things that we have developed, and everything we do is tracked in the open. So issues that you raise or issues that we identify, we track everything through the GitHub issues, and assign it to milestones for the next release. So you can look at those to learn about what's next. And I'll pop the links into the chat window once Mike takes over. And so looking at the release, you can really see a change log of everything that's changed to kind of decide if you want to upgrade to this version or if you want to wait like for the next one if nothing important for you has changed. And looking at the milestones, you can learn what's next on our radar. And a really important point is also like if you see something that we've got in our backlog, you can vote on it, you can comment on it, you can add your own scenarios to it so that we understand how important something is for you. So a really recent example is that we've heard from customers that they want to customize the email templates that we have in as part of the kit, or they want to use Teams instead of Outlook, or customers that don't have Outlook want to use a different way of communicating. And previously that would have involved modifying quite a handful of flows to do that. So we posted this on GitHub and we got a lot of attention on it. Like a lot of people added their scenarios to it. Some of them things like multilingual emails for their like broad community. So with the December release that's going to come out in 2 weeks, that we're actually addressing that. So we will be making it possible for you to configure email templates, and we've moved all of the email actions into one flow that is triggered from all of the other flows, so that if you do want to change from Outlook to Teams adaptive cards or things like that, you have to change it only in one place, etc. So yeah, huge influence on hearing from the community there. And the way we developed the COE Starter Kit, and that's kind of a good segue in handing over to Mike. We use the ALM Accelerator for Advanced Makers that Mike will introduce to you to release and ship the COE Starter Kit. We've got one development environment per solution and Azure DevOps pipelines that deploy the solution to build validation, test, and production environments when we ship. So we can validate that a clean install and an upgrade works before we ship it, that everything is kind of in the state that we want it to be in. And then once we've verified that all the way down to a production environment, we have a release pipeline that zips up all of the components that are part of the COE kit. It closes out issues that are part of that milestone, prepares the release and the change log, and updates that in GitHub. So that process definitely has come on a long way since we've started working with Mike. I won't lie. Before that, it was manual, and now it's automated and takes about a tenth of the time. So yeah, we're customers of the ALM Accelerator as well in that sense. So with that, I'll hand it over to Mike to introduce the ALM Accelerators to you.
Thanks, Manuela. Let me just share my screen. Can everybody see the slides?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
All right, so as Manuela mentioned, the ALM Accelerator was kind of born out of a requirement that the COE Starter Kit had to be able to ship faster, to do those monthly releases, and to practice good ALM, application lifecycle management, on top of the COE Starter Kit. And it was initially developed to be an internal tool. We eventually decided that we should put it out there for the rest of the community to use, and it is also it's not shipped with the COE Starter Kit today. It's still in preview. It is shipped on a slightly different schedule, but we're starting to get to a point where we're going to start shipping on the same schedule as the COE Starter Kit, and eventually it will be shipped with the COE Starter Kit. The ALM Accelerator is a Canvas app that sits on top of Azure DevOps pipelines. And essentially, the Canvas app gives makers the ability to have a sort of point and click way of doing things like pull requests and exports and to a Git repository. But the real power behind the ALM Accelerator is in the pipelines. And those pipelines are developed in such a way that they're flexible. They can be used without the app itself. That's not necessarily recommended, but you could use those pipelines without the app itself. The app simply calls those pipelines to do its work. And the scenario that we'll kind of, and my part of this demo will be mostly a demo. I only have 2 slides, but the idea is that a maker team or an individual maker can develop their solutions, develop their apps and automation in a solution, take that solution and push it into a Git repository. And they can work in isolation, they can work in their own branch of that Git repository, and they can push as often as they like. So I'm doing work in Power Apps on a solution. I want to sort of back up and keep a history of the changes I've made over time. I can continue to push to my individual branch, and once I'm finished with my work, I would create a pull request off of that branch into the sort of next version branch, and then that would sort of initiate the process of review, and it would give a chance for somebody else to kind of peer review the code, but also it runs some checks as part of that pull request to ensure that the solution can be unpacked, packed, and pushed to another environment. It runs solution checker at that point. So there's some validation, automated validation that goes on, as well as the ability for an individual to come in and actually look at the code changes that have been made in that pull request. And then ultimately what happens is that pull request gets approved or it gets denied, and the maker has to go back to make the changes that are required. If it gets approved, it gets pushed into a downstream environment. So the scenario that I'll show today is that validation environment, which is what happens when a pull request is created. It simply pushes it to a validation environment before it actually gets into testing. And then once the pull request is approved, it goes to test. Once everything's been tested, another pull request gets created into production, and then ultimately the solution gets pushed to production. So this is pretty much what I just described, but sort of in an order of steps as far as who's responsible for what and when things happen. And so, like I said, you'll click to export. There's a button to export your solution into source control. There's also the ability to import changes from source control. So if you are in the scenario where it's not a single maker, but it's multiple makers working in their own isolated environments, and I need to pull changes in from somebody else who's made changes to the solution, I can do that from the app. And then kind of just going down the list here, click to push, and that exports in an automated fashion, create a pull request, the validation kicks off, that gets approved, it deploys the test, pull request in the main, and that deploys to production. And with that, I'm actually going to just jump into the demo. Since I'm sharing my screen, you guys should be able to see me tabbing around quite a bit. I apologize for that. It's not the best experience, but so this is the ALM Accelerator for Advanced Makers, or what is currently, as of today, called the ALM Accelerator for Advanced Makers. We're rebranding a little bit because we've added some features to it, and these are the latest sort of bits that we're planning to release next month. So you'll be seeing some things that aren't currently available out on GitHub, but will be available as of next month. But this is the ALM Accelerator, and what we're seeing here is a list of all of the unmanaged solutions in my maker environment. And generally, for the COE starter kit, they're not working out of a single environment. This is kind of my test environment. So now I've got a bunch of unmanaged solutions in here, but these are all of the things that I can actually dev on in my maker environment, in my isolated maker environment. And we've got a couple of buttons here. I can jump right into a solution. I can search for solutions. So I'm going to search for my suggestion box solution. Here we go. I can jump right into that. I can do my development work. And the idea is that this would be where a maker kind of starts their day, right? So that they're always kind of working in the context of a solution, because everything in Power Platform ALM right now is based off of solutions. If you have apps and flows and things like that sit out of a solution, the ALM experience is not fantastic, and it's mostly manual with exporting and importing those things. So the full sort of ALM solution is based on Dataverse solutions. So I can come in here, I could create a new app, I could modify one of my existing apps, and let's go to our suggestion viewer here. So this app is not nearly as clean and pretty as what Manuela was just showing. This is just a sample that I built up. It's very contrived. It is an app. It's a model-driven app where you can enter a suggestion and it pushes it to SharePoint. And then ultimately this Canvas app surfaces all of the SharePoint list items. Pretty contrived, but there could, it's a scenario where you could see how that would, where that sort of integrations into different systems and things would be in the real world. So I'm going to make one quick change to this. I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to get rid of this because I don't have any details here and this button doesn't do anything. And that's about it. So these are all my SharePoint list items. And we'll save that. Publish it. And if I were to come back over to my solution, let's look for our suggestion box. Here it is. Oh, sorry. Let me go back to app. So I also have my model-driven app here. And I'm going to add a new suggestion. And this is let's say, make environment variable management easier. Save and close that. And that shows up in there. And now if I come back to my app and give our flow a second to run. Let's go back to our apps here. Suggestion viewer, launch that again. And there we go. So there's our make environment variable management easier. Pretty good stuff. But what's interesting about this and how simple this app really is and how contrived it is that there are a lot of things going on in this solution related to how ALM works in the Power Platform. We don't just have a Canvas app sitting out there or a model-driven app sitting out there that doesn't have any connection references into different systems. What we have is a whole slew of components in our solution. We've got a Canvas app, we've got a choice here, we've got a Cloudflow, we've got a connection reference. We actually have two connection references. So we have a connection reference into Dataverse, we have a connection reference into SharePoint. We've got data source environment variables in here that we have to set when we deploy to a downstream environment. We also have to reconnect these connection references when we deploy to a downstream environment, which isn't a trivial thing. We've got, and then we've got some standard sort of Dataverse things here that we're deploying. To do this, if you were to export this and as a managed solution and just import it from the front end, it would generally work in the downstream environment because you would be presented with a screen that says, okay, give me the connection for these connection references. Okay, go ahead and specify the environment variables. But in a headless way from a pipeline in Azure DevOps, those things aren't simple to do because connection references specifically into SharePoint and Dataverse in this instance require authentication from a user. And when you're doing this in a pipeline in Azure DevOps, there's no context of a user. And unfortunately, a service principal at this point in time can't create those connections on the behalf of a user. So we're kind of left with when we create a pipeline to deploy these things, we're kind of left with a broken app. And a lot of times what people have to do is go into the back end or actually go into the downstream environment and reconnect all of this stuff and fix it up. And that has its own drawbacks in that, you create unmanaged layers in the downstream environment, and then the subsequent import doesn't take your changes. So there's a lot going on here that we've tried to solve with the ALM Accelerator. And in some cases, it's using stuff that is available in the platform. In other cases, we're kind of going down from Azure DevOps tasks to PowerShell to APIs to get these things to work. But the idea is that when you develop a solution and deploy it, it should be in a working state in the downstream environment. And we don't want to have to go in and fix that thing up. So coming back here, I did make a change to the app. I'm sort of ready with that change. I want to, at least save that work for the day so that I have some history of what happened. So I can commit changes from here. And I can enter some notes, and I'll say remove button. And if I hashtag this with a issue number in Azure DevOps, then it'll link that to that issue number, or that whatever they call them, work item number in Azure DevOps. And I have the ability here now to create a new branch. So I can say I want to create this off of, say, my suggestion box branch. And this is, I'll give it a name, just so it shows up at the top of the list. And right, sorry about that. And then, so I'm going to create a new branch in Azure DevOps based on this branch. And the step here, I've kind of got all of the options lit up here, and I'm going to show you once we kick this off, the sort of maker versus advanced maker experience, because a lot of this stuff is kind of esoteric. Words like commit and things like that may not resonate with a maker. So we do have the ability to change that. We have the ability to turn off a lot of this stuff that sort of an advanced maker would do, where a maker would potentially not know how to do or understand the concept behind. And I'll show you that once we run through this. So the first step, once you're ready to commit, is to prepare your solution. And preparing a solution is setting up all of those things that we talked about: connection references, environment variable, app sharing in a downstream environment. So being able to share an app by default with a Azure Active Directory group, as well as setting the ownership of components in the downstream environment. So in this case, I've got 3 environments. We've got our validation. That's the one that gets deployed to when the PR is created. We've got our tests. That's the one that gets pushed to when the PR is approved. And then we've got prod, which is ultimately when we push to main and are ready to go with the app. So I've got my connection references here. It's already wired up ones that exist in the downstream environment. If one of these didn't exist, let's say, for example, SharePoint, we'll go to the one that exists currently. I can delete this, and it's used by a bunch of things, but let's go ahead and delete it anyway. And I come back here and hit refresh. This is just as an example. So now we can see I have a not connected SharePoint connection reference, and I don't have anything in this drop down. I have a couple of options here. I can request that somebody else do this on my behalf. So I can look for Nat and say, Nat, can you go? And that's just going to pop an email window to ask Nat to go ahead and create this connection for me. And or I can create it myself. So I'm going to go ahead and create it myself. That'll take me into my validation environment and will drop me into the connection creation process. Go ahead and create it. And I'm pretty much done here. So we'll go back, hit refresh again. And this sort of mimics the experience that you get when you import a solution manually. You get that dialogue that asks you to wire these things up. We're just wiring it up ahead of time so that the pipelines know what to do when it imports into these environments. And you can switch between environments. So I can, move to my test environment and, and set up connections there and environment variables, etc. So if we look at environment variables, I have a single environment variable in here. I've actually got 2, right? Because this is a data source environment variable, and I have to specify a site and a list in that SharePoint site. So I can pick one here. It'll refresh this. You can see I've got 3 lists in this one, but I'm going to leave this as this one, and we're going to specify the issue tracker. If you have, decimal, string, text environment variables, they would also show up here. And then you just have a text box to enter what those values are. Moving on to app sharing, we have a single app, Canvas app right now, and it's the suggestion viewer. I can share this. This is a list of Azure AAD groups that I can share with. And if I were to drill down into this one, for example, I can actually see, who are the members of that group. Happens to be me and Joni. And then I can set permissions on this. So in the test environment, this group can only view. If I wanted to give them edit or view and share responsibilities, I could do that as well. And then finally, component ownership. Component ownership is the way that you can specify who owns a flow in a downstream environment, and specifically a flow right now. But the idea is that if you have a sort of scheduled flow, for example, that needs to be owned by a specific user to go against, their API. When the APIs are called and things like that, it goes against sort of their what's provided to them, as opposed to when a flow is imported into a downstream environment by a pipeline, it's generally going to be owned by the service principal. And if all of your flows are owned by a service principal in the downstream environment, then you don't get that ability to kind of split up, the API calls and things like that. So that's what the component ownership is about. But in this case, we'll just leave that as is. All right, so once I've configured all of this, I can save and close from here. That's going to drop me back into my commit. I can go ahead and push that. And these pipelines take a little while to run. The export on this can take up to 6 minutes. So while that's running, and before we kind of jump into the back end, the Azure DevOps side of this, I'm going to walk you through a little bit of the changes we've made recently to provide a more maker experience and versus the advanced maker experience. So the reason I have this box up here is because Johanna happens to be an administrator in this environment and has access to all of the experiences, and I can toggle between them. And if I toggle between advanced maker and advanced maker, you'll see there's some things that light up, some things that go away. You also see that now we've got some different verbiage in here that kind of may seem or may be a little bit more approachable to a maker versus an advanced maker. The maker experience doesn't have the import solution. It doesn't have the delete solution. We want to prevent makers from performing those actions. We've also got in the advanced maker experience, I can actually drill down into these and get to Azure DevOps and see what's going on. So this drops me into my export pipeline in Azure DevOps. I can see the job is running. I can see all the steps that it's going through, etc. But in the maker experience, if I try to click this, I'm not going to get anywhere. So in the interest of not confusing a maker with, and dropping them into Azure DevOps and potentially them not understanding what's going on, we can disable that functionality. But we do have a detail of the history. So as a maker, I can actually drill down into this and I can see everything that's happened with this solution. So I can see it failed earlier this morning when I tried to push it, and we'll look at why that failed. We can see that there was a pull request created or a publish created. You can see that Johanna clicked or did an export or a save solution. And this experience changes based on the type of user as well. Let me jump over real quick and I'll show you what it looks like for somebody who doesn't have access to all of the experiences. So this is Nat Rantanakasan. I'm not sure how to pronounce that name. But so Nat doesn't see the box up here. Nat's been assigned a specific experience, and as a result, doesn't see that box, doesn't see the import, doesn't see the delete. But if Nat were to go in and look at suggestion box, she'd see that Johanna had done an export at 10:47 a.m. And if Nat happened to have the import solution functionality in place, Nat could go out and actually pull this branch once this finishes. So jumping back to, and that would essentially give Nat the ability to pull in all of the latest changes that I've made and kind of start her work from where Johanna left off. So there's some collaborative ability here with multiple makers and multiple environments. Let's go back to Johanna, and that's still running. If we look at what the import looks like from here, there's the concept of a profile in here. The profile has all of the information that's related to source control, where the pipelines live, etc. So if we look at this solution profile, you'll see it's pointing to an Azure DevOps organization, a project, a repository, and sort of a default branch in that repository. And then we've got our environments here. So these are what we saw when we configured the deployment settings. These are our 3 environments: validation, tested, production, and then the URLs to where those point to. On the import side, if I select this one, and let's say I want to pull in suggestion box branch, and I look at what's in the suggestion box branch, I've got a folder called suggestion box. I can import that solution essentially from source control. So that's the import experience. I'm not going to do that right now because we've got an ongoing export going on. The delete solution. So the delete solution is a sort of a nice to have over top of a pipeline that allows you to delete an unmanaged solution. And deleting an unmanaged solution in Dataverse, if you delete it from the Solution Explorer experience, it just deletes the container. It doesn't delete any of the components in that container. So if I wanted to wipe out the suggestion box solution in my environment and pull in the latest suggestion box, I could delete this solution and essentially have a sort of a clean slate to import the latest. So if I kick that off, it's going to essentially export the solution as managed. It's going to import the solution over top of the unmanaged solution, and then it's going to go and delete the managed solution, which just gives you the ability to kind of delete everything from under an unmanaged solution. Obviously, there are dependencies there. You kind of have to be careful. That's why there's that big red note up here. You have to be careful about that because if there are dependencies, the delete may fail, but it's sort of a nice to have layer over top of that pipeline that does that for you. All right, so like I said, this is still running, but let's go ahead and jump into see what happens in deploy. So for deploy, you got a title, some notes. You've got a source branch. So this is the branch to which you did your last export to. So here's our testing suggestion box branch. If I want to pull that into the suggestion box branch, I can do that from here. We'll just put test since we're running out of time here. Probably want to put some better notes than that. Click deploy. And what we end up with is a pull request. And in this case, we actually can see there's some merge conflicts. So something got pushed into suggestion box, or well, this is not the one I just created. This is the one that was created before. But anyway, something got pushed into main before it got pushed into suggestion box. So we have a conflict here, and we can resolve these conflicts from right within Azure DevOps. And what we'll see is that we have a connection reference that changed. And so when you saw that our previous deployment request failed, the reason that deployment request failed is because I had the wrong connection reference in my solution. I went back and fixed that up, so we can actually see the changes that were made to the solution, and we can rectify them from here. I can just take source from the left. So that's good. I know that I fixed this up, and this is what I want. And then from here, obviously, I can approve my own changes. I can click complete. And when I do, since this is suggestion box into main, it's going to kick off a pipeline over here. It should have. I do the wrong one. We should have it might take a second to spin up, but it should have kicked off this pipeline. Something might have went wrong there, but This is the export solution. So this is the one that we just ran that's finished by now. So now we can see that our export finished and actually drill down into that and see some of the details. If we go to our branches here, and this is about running close on time here. If we go to our branches and look for here's our branch, and here's all the latest code. So you can see this was updated 3 minutes ago. We go to solution package, Canvas app. You can actually see the source control friendly change that was made in here. So if we the history, remove button. So there we go. So our button is no longer there. Here's the difference between the previous version without the button in it. All right, that was a lot to cover. I haven't been looking at the chat, but if there's any questions in the last 4 minutes for Manuela or I, we can take them.
Wow, thank you very much, Mike. To be honest, I wasn't expecting this, to be honest, and sounds like that's a nice little prize there. A lot of people are very surprised to see this, and it's really just shows the art of the possible with Canvas apps, really, what you can do. So there are a few questions in the chat. Just going to take a quick look now. We've got a couple of minutes where we can quickly go through some of these questions. So let's take a look. It's Dean Holmes is asking, can this be used for classic model-driven app deployment?
Yes, of course. And that's where, we're kind of highlighted some of the things outside of model-driven apps that are complicated. Model-driven apps, they've been around long enough that they're pretty solid on the ALM side. So if you export them to a solution and import them, they come along nicely. So yes, absolutely. Anything that is source control aware can be used with.
Valentine is asking the question, I have tried to figure out the ALM accelerator some time ago. They have found that the CI/CD pipelines, they find a bit obvious, plus learning Azure pipelines gives more scope and versatility than learning a separate application, which many people, even from D365 world, aren't always aware of. Can you think of any examples where the ALM accelerator is more convenient and useful than Azure?
I think it's in the maker experience, right? So kind of abstracting away Azure DevOps from the maker. The maker is going to be more comfortable using an app because they're familiar with apps than Azure DevOps. So there's a learning curve. If your users are comfortable with Azure DevOps, then it makes sense. And there's still that ability. Like I said, the ALM Accelerator is just a layer over top of Azure DevOps. It just provides some easy buttons. It doesn't try to be Azure DevOps. It just provides a way to kind of kick off pipelines, get things into source control without the user having to context switch necessarily to Azure DevOps, if that makes sense. So we haven't tried to build in any Azure DevOps functionality into this because obviously Azure DevOps is very good at what it does right now, and we don't want to do that.
I agree, and I think also keeping with the low-code story, having makers, forcing them to learn Azure DevOps is something whereby you don't always want to do, and if they've got an alternative, just to get them started, well, this is a great solution. So yeah, thanks, Mike. So the next question is by Brahmi, who's asking, one challenge we have is how can we customize the starter kit while keeping it upgradable? We were advised to create a separate copy of the flows and apps, only those that we want to customize, as trivial as changing a value in a flow, and save them in a new unmanaged solution. Is this
I'll take that one. Yeah, I think
Thank you, Manuela. Okay. So you've answered the question in the chat for extending the toolkit. There you go. So thanks, Manuela, for sharing the answer there and sharing the guide to extending the starter kit. Excellent. Okay, I think we are at the end of the hour. the one final question, Eduardo was asking, the ALM accelerator could also be used in model-driven scenarios.
Yeah, I think that was the first question as well. Yes, absolutely.
Fantastic. So Barami is saying brilliant. I guess we're doing it right. Many thanks. So again, I want to give a big, huge thanks both to Manuela and Mike for taking time out to demo this and show this off for many of us who haven't seen it, and to understand what we're missing out on. So big thank you to you both. Before you go, do you have any final announcements you'd like to make around the toolkit or accelerator or anything else?
We stay tuned for our December release of the ALM Accelerator. That's going to have some of the features I showed today. Right now, the one that's out there is mostly advanced scenario. So just stay tuned to that. And at some point, we will, I'm not making any promises of when, but we will be supporting GitHub workflows as well.
Many thanks to you both. There you go, guys. That was Mike and Manuela joining us from opposite places off the world, sharing this very, very, very helpful toolkit to help you succeed with using the Dataverse and doing your deployments for Power Apps effectively. Now, we are on to our keynote session now. So we are moving